I was going to introduce Tracy. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming a little bit early to the work session. Don, let me know if you want to weigh in at some point before this starts. But Tracy Johnson is with us tonight, and she is from Environmental Science Associates. They are the consultants that the city hired to do the master plan. And she's here tonight to walk us through the first 4 chapters of the plan, kind of help you grasp what those first 4 chapters cover. Tracy has a lot of project management experience, master planning. I also found out, I did a little snooping, and she's also a landscape architect as well, and does park and trail design on top of everything else. So welcome, Tracy. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. All right, let me get my share screen put together here. Sorry, I was
no problem. While you're doing that, I want to say a word or two to the committee. I want to thank everybody for coming early. Normally 7 o'clock start time, tonight at 6:30. This is kind of an unusual thing. Study sessions are something that you know, we will be doing from time to time. Typically, the way they work is that there are 1 or 2 topics at the most, kind of special event to focus on one area. If we have public, generally it's kind of at our discretion whether we allow them to speak or not during the study sessions, or to the level that we want to allow participation. Study sessions are always open to the public with one big exception, and that's for executive sessions. Executive sessions in our case can only be done for contracts or legal disputes or labor issues or property acquisitions. I can assure you that the only time we'll ever have an executive session is if we're dealing with a property acquisition. And that'll be, unfortunately, rarer than we always like it to be. So with that, Tracy, you ready to go?
I think so. I believe my screen sharing has been resolved.
All
so
right.
I have to share this from non-slideshow, and then I will begin the slideshow. So it should kick in just a moment.
We can see it.
There we go. My PowerPoint has been acting up a little bit today. This is a pretty lean presentation, but anyways, thanks everyone for joining us. I am going to give you a brief presentation about the first 4 chapters that you've had in your possession for a few weeks, just talking about how we got here and just some of the fine points. And then we can have a little bit of discussion at the end if you have any questions or anything you want more clarification on. We do have another work session scheduled in a couple of weeks, and that one's going to be longer. So we'll be sending out more information for you to digest, and then we'll have more time to discuss at the next meeting. So I'm going to get started. As Sarah said, I am a landscape architect and a project manager with Environmental Science Associates, and I've been working with the city of Sandy on this park and trail system master plan for about 15 months. The project has gone a little longer than originally planned, but we're getting close to the finish line now, so that's great. And so I'm just going to jump into it. So first of all, the purpose of a park and trail master plan. What is the purpose, or why do we do it? So this is really a long-range planning document. It's a guideline that the city uses to plan for parks and trails for a pretty long planning horizon, something like 15 or 20 years. So the prior plan was from 1997, and it was intended to cover the needs of the community through 2015. So being as it's 2021, we're a little behind on doing an update, which is not uncommon. It happens to communities all the time, but Sandy's in the unique position that A, a lot has changed in that planning period, and B, you had actually accomplished almost everything in your prior plan, and so it was really time for an update. So some of the things that we look at when we're doing a park and master plan update is we look at what we have now, where we might have gaps in service or places that don't have as much access to parks or trails, where we think growth or neighborhoods are going to happen in the future, and where we might want to plan for trail connections or parks in those areas. And of course, how we're going to pay for both the acquisition, the development, and the maintenance of the parks, because it's easier to get money to buy and build parks than it is to maintain them. So I just set up the slideshow with a brief chapter to break out so that we could talk about the chapters as we go, just to help you follow along, since some of you probably haven't been, I understand a lot of you are new to the board, so you haven't heard all of these pieces of information before. So as I said, some of the goals that we had coming into this process were to think about the future of the Sandy Community Campus. It's been in the city's ownership for a while and is kind of sitting there. Not a lot's happening. As I understand, the fields are getting used this year and the track gets used and some other elements, but it's underutilized and underdeveloped for what it could be for the city. As I said, we want to plan for future growth. Just in the time that we've been working on this plan, we've had several neighborhoods that have come in for subdivision approval, and we've included parks and trails planning in those subdivisions as they've come through to help serve the new neighborhoods that'll be coming with them. We've developed maps, and some of the maps that we've developed are in the first 4 chapters that you already have, and then there will be additional maps in the second half of the report. They have maps map out both the current layout of where things are and then where we think we need things in the future. That'll be in part 2 next time. We put together a capital improvement list, which is the plan for how much we think it's going to cost and what we think our priorities are. So we'll talk about that more next time. And then funding strategies and other things that obviously are in part 2. And then, sorry, I did not organize my goals in part 1, part 2. I didn't think of that until now. And then finally, there are a number of, aside from Sandy Community Campus, which is a little bit underdeveloped, I would say, there are a number of park parcels that have been acquired over the years that haven't been developed yet. And so part of this plan was to look at those and to think about what the neighborhoods need, what the community needs, and put together some preliminary master plans to hopefully move those forward and get them built in the near term. So the planning area for this project includes the city limits and the UGB. And for this project, because Sandy is growing so fast, we have also included the urban growth reserves, which is the darkest orange area is the actual city limits, the lighter orange. Sorry, I don't know if you can't see my pointer. Let me see how I make that.
Yeah, we can see it.
Can you? Okay. I can't see it on my screen, but it's good to know that it's there. I guess I can see it on one screen, but not the other. Anyways, the darkest areas are the city limits. The lighter orange are the UGB, and then the white areas are the urban reserves. And so this larger gray boundary is the primary area that we're looking at. And so obviously, the majority of the existing parks and trails are in the dark orange areas with a few in the light orange areas. And then as the community grows, we'll talk about demographics in a minute, but as the community grows, the primary growth areas are likely to be in the white urban reserve areas. So we want to make sure we're thinking about distribution and connectivity of those new things, parks and trails as those areas come into the park system. And I believe it was Mary was talking about a parcel that's up for sale and possibly going to change hands along 211. And so that's one of the areas where you can see there's a lot of area in the urban reserve. There are some new neighborhoods related to the Ponder Lane Park that have come into the UGB just in the time that we've been working on this project. So things have been changing pretty rapidly. They always do, but anyway, that's what we're looking at when we think about the future of the park system. So progress since the last master plan. So like I said earlier, the master plan was prepared and adopted in 1997. That was the first park master plan for the city of Sandy, and it was planned to run through 2015. It anticipated significant population growth, more than actually you saw. So they thought you would be at 18,000 people by 2015. Our current population is about 11,600 with the forecast for 2035 to be a little over 19,000. So growth has not been as steep as planned, but it still has been pretty significant. It's more than doubled in the time since this original master plan was adopted. This master plan established 11 park and trail classifications, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. It recommended level of service for 8 of those classifications, which is how much of those parks we provide, and we will talk about that in a moment. And then since then, as I said, many of the goals that were in that plan have been achieved. So many acres of parkland have been acquired. In many cases, they've been developed. Quite a few mini parks and neighborhood parks have come into the park system, primarily through subdivisions where land was acquired through either land dedication and development by the developer, or fee in lieu acquisition and development. But anyways, it's been a pretty successful plan, and it was time for an update. And so that's what we've been doing. So in chapter 2, we call that chapter the community profile. And in this chapter, we talk about the composition of the community and the types of public outreach that we have achieved so far through the process. So as I said, the population currently is estimated to be about 11,100 people. And the forecast population for 2035 is about 19,000. So that's the current planning horizon. And this plan is hopefully going to cover from today or this year till 2035. Now, these population estimates come from PSU, and they normally are updated. So PSU, there's the census, which happens every 10 years. Obviously, we're due for new census results, but we don't have those yet. So PSU has a population forecast that they put together based on their tracking of growth in Portland and the metropolitan areas and the rest of Oregon as well. And also, you know, it's based on the census and based on their understanding of growth within our community. So this is an estimate. It's usually fairly close though. And we use this as part of when we get into level of service, we use what our population is and what our population is forecast to be to figure out how many parks and trails we need. And demographic shift since 2000. These are somewhat preliminary because the new census data is not in. And so we may actually see greater shifts than what we're seeing currently in the forecast. But we know the population grew. It doubled in size since 97, but not as much as anticipated. In general, the number of younger children appears to have declined a little bit, and the number of adults over 55 has increased a little bit. And the number of people who indicated Hispanic or Latino ethnicity, about 3 or 4% in 97 to about 10% is the estimate. And all of those are somewhat subject to once we get the final census data, but it's at least gives us a snapshot of where we think we are in the community. So throughout this process, we have held a number of different public outreach events, and we've tried to reach out to the community in a number of ways. So Sarah has helped with, she's taken flyers. I don't think I actually put this. She dropped off flyers in neighborhoods. She has hosted the social media and kept the website up to date. She sent, I think, email blasts and mailers at different times in the process to help keep the community up to speed and notify them of events and meetings we were having. In January of last year, we held stakeholder interviews with a variety of people from the community. We talked to people about community gardens, about baseball and softball and sports fields. There were quite a few people who were interested in skate parks and pump tracks and more alternative sports offerings, or refreshing the skate park and then providing some additional unique features. We talked to people about maintenance. We talked to the parks maintenance department about concerns, shortcomings, things that need work. So that was one of the important things, is getting information from different community members. We also talked to the Hispanic community at that time, and we talked about methods for other outreach. And so then in addition to that, we had a technical advisory committee, which has been involved throughout the process. We've had about 6 meetings. That committee was composed of members of the public representing different focus areas or community groups, as well as some city staff, a city councilor, some Park and Trail Advisory Board members. And so it was kind of a combination of people with a little bit more technical experience and also people who were like part of the city's system, you know, staffing, and then people from the community to provide input. We've had 6 meetings over the course of the project with the advisory committee. And then we also have had 3 public workshops or open houses over the course of this. So we had one public meeting that was held at the community center, at Senior Center, which you can see, that's the photo in the bottom right there. We had a pretty good turnout for that. Quite a few people came, and we had a survey and questionnaire that was associated with that. And then we held a second meeting that was specifically trying to reach out to the Hispanic community. And we held that neighborhood meeting at the Vista Apartments in their community room. And we had a very good turnout for that as well. And for that, we had materials available in both English and Spanish. And we had interpreters and people who spoke Spanish as well as English at the meeting so that we could help answer questions and present the information to people. And for that meeting, it was interesting because we had the kids, and you can see here are a couple of boys in one of these photos. The kids all spoke English and filled out the English questionnaires, and their parents all primarily spoke Spanish and filled out the Spanish language questionnaires. So that was interesting to me. I had never seen that happen at a public meeting before. And then in addition to those two in-person open houses, so the Spanish language open house was 2 days before COVID shut everything down. So that was our last in-person event. And then over the summer, we were working after this. So this was in March. And then we worked on advancing the plan. And then over the summer, we developed an online open house, held a third online open house in October to help get input on the progress we'd made and the proposals that we were making as part of this plan. And then from that, we've advanced the plan and come to some final recommendations, which we will discuss next time. So that was the public outreach. So let's talk a little bit about the existing park system. Oh dear, I'm getting short on time already, 6:49. All right, I will speed talk here through the end. So this map is in the packet that you all received. And what this shows is it shows the different parks that are in the current Sandy park system and the trails, which are dashed brown and tan. And the different parks are color-coded by park classification. So the primary park classifications that we have in the system are mini parks, which are red, but they're very small, so it's hard to see on the screen. Neighborhood parks, which are purple. Community parks, which are kind of that turquoise color. And then we have open space and natural areas, which are kind of green. And then we have one larger special use area, which is John's Root Overlook, which is up here in the orange. So park classifications are, they're kind of a standard method of identifying what a park is, how big it should be, and what kind of services it's going to provide. So these classifications are used throughout the park planning world, and it's a way of thinking about, so a mini park is usually a very small park. It might have a short trail, a picnic table, a bench, and a small play structure. And it's usually, there's no parking, no restrooms. It doesn't have support facilities because it's supposed to be close walking distance within your neighborhood. So a quarter mile or less travel distance. A neighborhood park is a little bit bigger. It's usually a couple of acres in size and can have all of those amenities that's in a mini park, plus some other things. That might have a tennis court or a basketball court or an open field for playing soccer or frisbee. Usually it'll have more park picnic facilities, maybe a picnic shelter. Usually it would have a loop trail, and all of the trails in most of these parks would be considered accessible, which means that they can be used by people in wheelchairs, people with strollers, things like that. Again, neighborhood parks usually don't provide restrooms or parking spaces, although sometimes they do. Community parks are larger. They're usually in the 10 acres or more size range, and they often serve more active uses. So they kind of build on each other. So they'll have all of the things that are in the neighborhood park, plus often things that people might drive to get to, like baseball field, softball field, soccer, a splash pad, amphitheater. So Meinig is a community park and it has an amphitheater. Sandy Community Campus, while it's undeveloped currently, is a community park, and we hope that it'll have a number of amenities, and community parks normally would have restrooms and parking. And then there are a number of other park classifications, such as the natural areas and open space and special use. And special use is kind of a category that is special in that it can include a number of things. So it includes John's Root Overlook. It includes the skate park, things that are like a dedicated use or kind of a specialty thing that's not really a park. So this is just a quick summary of the inventory. The more detailed inventory is in the packet that you already have in your possession. But you can see we have a fairly good distribution of park types, park classifications within our system, and we have a decent number of acres as well. one thing to point out is under the neighborhood parks, as I'd mentioned previously, we have a fair amount of, we have 16.89 acres that are developed, which means those parks are usable, but we have about 21.29 acres total. So there are a number of parks that are not developed that add to the total park acreage, but do not currently serve the community as well as they could. And for community park, we have a similar situation. We have 10.8 acres, which is developed, which is considered to be mining, but there's a total of 24.8 because there's about 14 acres at Sandy Community Campus, which, while not completely undeveloped, isn't serving as much good as it could because it doesn't have a lot going on yet. Okay, so now level of service. I'm sorry, Don, I think I'm gonna run out of time. We might have.
I was gonna tell you, it's okay to take a few extra minutes. This is important stuff that we kind of build this foundation before the next time we meet to discuss the next two chapters. So if we need to take a little extra time, it's okay.
Okay, well, and I'll talk about level of service and needs, and we can always start with that on a refresher when we get to next week or next week.
A little overlap there.
Yep, exactly. So level of service is another thing that's used in the park planning world. It's a way of thinking about how much park you have and how well you're serving the community. So level of service is usually discussed as a number of acres per thousand residents. And so in this case, with 11,000 residents, you think about how many acres we have per thousand of those. And so this is where we looked at our total acres for each park classification. So the total acres and developed acres were on the prior slide. And when this column where it says current level of service, what this is this is a calculation of 3.87 acres comes out to about 0.3 acres per thousand of your current population. And so you can see as you go down the line, mini parks, we have about 0.3, neighborhood, we have 1.83, community 2, etc. And so for the total level of service currently in the Sandy Park system, there's about 23.6 acres per thousand, which is very good. Natural and open space is obviously your largest number, and that's really boosting your total, but still it's a really good, you're at a very good level of service right now for the community. And so the areas that we see a little bit of a gap when we look at the current level of services, we looked at the developed acreage only. And so you can see for things like mini parks where all of your acres are developed, that number doesn't change. But when you have less acres developed, that brings your level of service down a little bit. So under neighborhood park, while you might have a total of 1.8 acres per thousand, you're actually currently really only providing about 1.4 because you have acres that are undeveloped and not really serving the community. And that's particularly true for community parks. So 2 acres per thousand is in the range of a target level of service, but really because the Sandy Community Campus is underdeveloped, you really have less than an acre per thousand that's actually serving the community. And Meinig also is a special case because it doesn't have some of those, it has special uses, but it doesn't have sports fields. So that's one of the things that you see is, we'll talk about this in a moment, but sports fields are generally associated with community parks, or they could be a special use if you have a dedicated sports facility. And so that's an area that's a gap in the current system, I would say.
So to touch on that, on your previous maps, I haven't seen anything that represents any kind of sports fields, and I'm not really sure where you'd even put sports field in Mining Park because it's all wooded area.
We're not proposing to put sports fields in Mining Park.
So what are you considering mining then?
I'm sorry, what?
You said mining was, part of it was undeveloped. What part are you talking about with mining then?
No. What I said that is mining doesn't provide some of the things that a community park normally does. The part of community parks that is undeveloped is the Sandy Community Campus. I'm sorry. Yep.
So about your other maps, I don't see anything that even comes close to adding any kind of sports fields or any kind of playing area to the master plan.
So the part of the master plan that you have so far is only the existing conditions portion. You have the first half of the plan. The second half will be delivered to you later this week or early next week. And that includes the proposed park system. So I didn't mention that in the beginning. Sorry, Don and Sarah and I are aware of this, but I did not actually share that information with you guys in the beginning. We've shared the first 4 chapters with you because it lays the framework for the last 2 chapters and the appendices, which have a lot more information in them. And so this is how we get to the proposals. This is the background information that we do to start figuring out what we think the needs of the community are. Okay, so as I was saying, so there can be a discrepancy between our current total level of service and our developed level of service. And so in this case, it looks like current developed level of service is significantly lower than total. And that's simply because natural and open space is a hard thing to quantify as developed or undeveloped, because it's usually primarily undeveloped, maybe with some trails. Now, looking at the 1997 plan standards, you can see this is what was proposed in the prior plan. And so if you look at that, in most cases, we're doing pretty well. We have, like, the goal was 0.1 acres per thousand for mini parks. We have 0.3, so we're doing better than the goal. Neighborhood parks, the goal was 1.6 acres per thousand. We're kind of in between, depending on it, you know, that falls in between our total and our developed. The one that is kind of a little bit of a deficiency is community parks. Our target was 2.6, and even if you look at total acreage alone, we're a little bit under that goal. Natural areas, the goal was 12 acres. We're actually at 19, so that's very good. And then trails, the goal was 1.1 miles. So I'm sorry, special use, not trails. Trails did not have a standard. So we're a little under, but special use, normally you do not really apply a level of service to. It's just something that supplements the system, but it's hard to quantify and it's not really usually compared. So, and then in 1997, no target was made for miles of trail system, but I didn't mention this previously. You have about 0.85 miles per thousand right now. So another thing that we look at when we're thinking about level of service, we look at what you planned last time and how you're doing compared to it, what some other communities around you that are similar size and have similar park systems are doing. We look at Scorp, which is the State Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan, which is an overarching guiding document, planning document that's put together by state parks every 5 years, I think. They update it and it comes out with a lot of, like, tracking information where they try to consolidate a lot of the things that you think about when you're putting together a community plan, so that communities, particularly smaller communities, have some guidance on, like, generally statewide, how much of things are people providing. So these examples, the Scorp recommended level of service, this is what they kind of have seen as an average across the state, is generally mini parks across the state, the average is 0.25 to 0.5 acres per thousand. Neighborhood parks is 1 to 2 acres. Community parks is 2 to 6. Open space is 2 to 6. So the range within the Scorp is usually, you know, it's a range and it's about 5 to 15 acres. Again, except for community parks, we're following right in the range on all of these. And similarly for trails, the Scorp recommendation is 0.5 to 1.5 miles per thousand. And at 0.85, you're right in the middle of it. So, I mean, overall, this is good news. This means that you're fairly well on track. And I think looking at this, the thing that we see is that the overall, the system is doing really well. It's built out at a good scale for the size of the community. But the one area where there's a little bit of work to be done is probably in the community parks. That would be maybe a focus. And trails, and then we'll talk about, so this is one way to look at these metrics. There are other ways to look at these metrics. There's information from the community, the stakeholders, the interviews, the surveys we got at the public meetings. We ask questions. What do you think is missing? What would you like to see? What is your favorite thing of the things that we provide? And those are another way to think about what do we have and what do we need, or what might be missing. And then there's also another thing, which is the service areas. And I'll talk about service areas in a minute, but I'm going to stop and just see if anybody has about level of service, because this is, it can be hard to get your head around if you've never had to look at it before.
Does anybody have any questions?
Sounds like maybe not. All right. So I'm going to move on to service areas. So service areas are another thing that's sort of tied to the park classification idea. So as I mentioned, mini parks usually have a service area that's about a quarter acre or quarter mile rather, or less. And so that means people that live within a quarter mile can easily walk to the park. Neighborhood parks are usually considered to have a service area of about half a mile. And so that still is like, because they don't have parking, they're primarily serving people who can walk or bike from their neighborhood to the park. And so this map, which is included in the packet that you guys have, shows the and the neighborhood park service areas within Sandy currently. And the solid, so the solid yellow is a quarter mile service area around the mini parks. It's interesting, it's like a little chain along the south side of town. And so that's showing, you know, they're serving the needs of some of the communities, particularly on this edge of downtown where there may not be a nearby neighborhood park, and it might be hard to find a couple acres to develop a full neighborhood park at this point. They serve an important need where you can get a couple lots and build a little mini park that at least serves the nearby community. So then the neighborhood parks, the solid aqua is a half mile service area. So for example, this is the half mile service area around Sandy Bluff. And then you can see they're overlapping, but there's a half mile service area around Tupper that's over here. And then there are several half mile service areas in this southeast quadrant associated with Bornstedt, Cascadia. And then we have the potential service areas. And so these are parks that are undeveloped right now. So the cross-hatched service areas are areas that would be served when the park is developed. So in this case, this would be the service area when Deer Point is developed, which is right here. Up here we have Champion Way, and that would cover a really nice big area up towards the west corner. And we've included Ponder Lane, which is a relatively recent acquisition in the south portion. And then we also are considering that Sandy Community Campus, once it's developed, as I said, usually these park classifications build on each other. So while Sandy Community Campus is a community park, it will also serve the neighborhood park functions for the close-in neighbors that live near Sandy Community Campus. And that's an area that, you know, is built out currently and doesn't have a lot of available land that could be used as a neighborhood park. And so it's a great way to get, you know, to serve the nearby community and also to serve people who might be driving from further around. Another thing that sometimes people look at is a service area for community parks. And usually a community park service area is in the range of 1.5 to 3 miles, but that's generally going to be considered longer than walking distance or biking distance. Some people will bike that, but not a lot. So usually that's because of the larger service area. That's why that type of park, usually it has organized sports, it has people arriving from various directions. And so you provide parking and things like that to support that greater travel distance. For Sandy, we didn't look at community park service areas for a couple of reasons. 3 miles pretty much spans the whole city. So there's not a lot of benefit. And the only 2 community parks you have here are right here in the center. So you could imagine that the community park service area would be pretty much centered around those 2 areas. But one of the things that this helps us think about is geographic distribution. Do we have parks everywhere where we have neighborhoods? Do we have neighborhoods that don't have a park and could use one? And the other thing that we look at in the service areas is barriers to access. And so you can see the red lines on here are Highway 26 and Highway 211. 26 is generally considered a barrier because it is a state highway. However, because there are signalized intersections going through downtown, you can cross from one side to the other, but generally a mom's not going to send her younger children on their own to the park to cross Highway 26. So it is a barrier for people from, you know, from that perspective, but you could still walk there crossing north to south or vice versa if you needed to. Highway 211, on the other hand, is a real barrier because there aren't really any, I don't think, maybe there's one signalized crossing along the entire length. So really without some improvements at intersections, you can't really assume that people would walk from over here to Ponder Lane or vice versa. And so that's another thing that we look at. And so you can see that these service areas have been cropped at the barrier where there really isn't safe access. And Deer Point is a really good example. There's a neighborhood, you know, over here, Vista Loop, there are houses and there's development coming in an apartment complex directly across from Deer Point, but there's no safe access to get across 26 at that location. There's no, like, the nearest signalized intersection is all the way back in town. So those are some of the things that we think about when we're thinking about geographic distribution, and do people have things near their house that they can get to easily to use for recreation purposes. Okay, so I'm going to move on to, we just got a few slides left. And needs analysis, I almost think we should carry this one over to next time for also. Oh, I mean, definitely. Do you want to go into this one, or do you want to table it for next time, Don?
About how long do you have to go?
I have 2 more slides, and then I think it's just next steps in Q&A.
Okay. Why don't you do a brief overview of this, and then we'll kind of pick up from this point moving forward after that too.
Okay.
So this will be part of our overlap on the.
Okay, that works. So this is where we take the needs analysis is where we take the level of service that we've looked at for where we are currently, and we look at our service areas and what we've heard from the community, and we start to think, what do we need? What do we need now? And what do we need to plan for the future for population growth? And so again, you can see the current developed level of service column is over here. It was carried over from the prior table. The Scorp recommended level of service is here, carried over from the prior table. And then this column is new. This is something that, you know, was developed with the technical advisory committee and city staff input. And so this is what we're proposing as our new target level of service in this master plan. So we're proposing mini parks. We heard a lot from maintenance staff that mini parks, they serve a need in the community, but they take a lot of time to maintain because they're so small. And, you know, you have to go to a lot of different sites. And so we're going to try and like reduce the reliance on mini parks. And so we've reduced our target level of service, which means right now we have more than we need, but over time that'll even out. Neighborhood parks, we think we could still use a few more. So our target level of service is a little bit above where we are now. Community parks, as I've said a couple times, we really feel like there's a deficiency in community parks in Sandy, and that's probably one of the areas to really focus on. And then natural and open space, we are anticipating targeting about 15 acres per 1,000, which is less than what we have currently, but it's more than what the target was in the last master plan. And then we've added a new level of service, which is for trails, and we're aiming for the top of the range. One of the other things we heard a lot through the public outreach was people are very interested in trail connectivity around town and between all the parks and different, you know, open spaces. And so obviously Tickle Creek Trail provides a really great corridor, and then linking that so that you can get from there to other places safely off the road. So that seemed to be a strong focus from a lot of the public input.
I have a question. Isn't that like synonymous, trails and natural and open spaces, pretty much like with each other, kind of?
The trails can, but don't always occur. I mean, are you saying trails usually are occurring in natural spaces?
Yeah, and they usually, like, to have a good trail, you want open and natural spaces, natural and open spaces within the vicinity or surrounding the trail in some fashion or another.
Well, there are a lot of different trail types, and so there are. And we'll actually talk about that a little bit next time. So I'm going to kind of punt on that question, but I'll just say we do have 4 proposed park classification or trail classifications and trail standards that is in the second part of the packet. And they go from like a narrow natural surface trail, like what you'd see in a natural area, to a gravel trail that's a little bit wider, to a narrower and wider paved option. And so that's where the trails category is encompassing a lot of different potential trail types. But there also are a lot of different user types. And so you need to have that diversity of types to serve a lot of different needs. So moving on to the second half of this table, I think when I inserted this, I must have accidentally cropped some stuff. looks like our top column got cropped off, so I'm gonna have to wing it. But I think what this is showing you is the first paired column is acres needed today. Acres needed and sort of how many parks that translates to as far as what we need today for our current population. I gotta look in my report and make sure it didn't get cropped in my report too. And so what this is showing is that acres needed today, we have surplus in the mini parks. We don't need any mini parks. That's why that number is negative. Neighborhood parks, we could use about 6 more acres. Community parks, we could use about 23 more acres.
And that 23 does not count the Sandy Community Campus, correct?
I think it does actually. So this is based on our developed level of service. And
so that'd be 23 minus 14.
Right, exactly. And and there are a couple of different ways you can present that. You could present that based on the current or the total. That's something we can decide if we wanted to change the format. It gets complicated. You have too many options, but you can choose which metric you want to use.
Right. David, are you trying to ask a question? David? Oh, apparently not.
So, and then again, under natural open space, you can see we have a surplus right now. So we have about 50 acres more than we need. Target level of service is lower than our current.
Am I still muted?
No,
nope.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
There we are. With the neighborhood parks, are we making the developers acquire the land and build these, or is this something from the city fund?
Neighborhood parks come from a couple of different sources. So funding is something we'll talk about next time in acquisitions methods, but land dedication is usually required when the subdivisions come in. And so the developers have to dedicate land or to pay a fee in lieu equivalent to the amount of land they need to provide for the neighborhood that they're developing. But that still would be included in this total, because the park system is paying for that usually in one way or another. So the developer pays for the land, but then usually if the developer develops the land, they get what's called, see, this is where we're getting into part 2, but they get an SDC or system development charge credit. Normally they would have to pay system development charges to help pay for park development. If they develop it themselves, then they get a credit for that. It like offsets itself. So we still, even though some of these are going to be built by developers or provided by developers, they are part of the plan because they're the plan for the whole community. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to go through these last 3 columns and we can then discuss them again next time once you've had a little bit more time to think about it. But so as I said, the first pair is current need. The second pair is future need. And so this is where we start to think about how many more we need for the future population growth projections. This is where we start to think about that 19,000 people in the future. And so, and this is just the difference between today's population in the future. So these calculations are based on that, but then you add these two together and you can see, so for future growth, we would need 1.87 acres of mini park, but we have a surplus of 0.96 currently, which means our total need for the 15-year planning horizon is only 0.9. So that's where we come down here. And then for each of these categories where we have a parks needed, this is based on like an approximate size. So if you assume, and there are footnotes in the table in your report that shows our assumed park size for each of these parks. So a mini park, I don't remember off the top of my head, but a mini park is a 1/4 acre, a neighborhood park is 1 acre, and a community park is 10 or 15. Basically, those are kind of the targets when we are thinking about like how many parcels does this mean? Because they'll, of course, parcels come in all different shapes and sizes, and parks come in different shapes and sizes. So you could get 1 acre that was flat and completely buildable, or you could get 5 acres that only has 1 acre that's completely flat and buildable. And so, this is a little bit of a estimation, but it helps us to know how many locations we need to think about where we would put these around town. So we need 10 more neighborhood parks. Where might we put those? Or we need 2 more mini parks and so then that carries into the next part, which is planning for the mapping of the future park system and the planning for the capital improvements for the future park system. So with that, the only last thing, and I'm just going to touch on this briefly, is Another thing that we looked at was the individual facilities, which is like baseball fields, basketball courts, tennis courts. And we looked at what our inventory for what we have in the community is currently, what the Scorp recommended level of services for that. And so that's like how many each of these do we need per 1,000 people. And so these are usually a fraction, as you can see. And then we kind of looked at what we have currently and what we might need now and in the future. And so this is, because of the decimals on this, it's a little hard to look at. So we kind of color coded it. So the things that are green, we feel like we're doing well with, we're meeting our current needs or exceeding them. The things that are pink are either things that we aren't providing at all currently and could consider providing, or they're things that we maybe don't have as much as we could. So volleyball courts, pickleball and tennis courts, and disc golf currently are not in the current park system at all. So they are not meeting the Scorp standard, but you know, certainly disc golf is an optional facility that communities can choose to have or not have. Pickleball and volleyball, you just don't have a lot of active sports currently, and so we don't have those in the current system. Day use picnic tables is the one that jumps out at me as one that we need to confirm the count on, just to make sure that we think that this number is correct, because we're definitely well below the average. And you can see like the Scorp recommendation is 10 picnic tables per 1,000. So at 3 per 1,000, we're well below the average right now. And then just at the bottom here, there are a few other, oops, I see one of these is coded wrong. There are a few facilities that are definitely more in the optional category: pump track, community garden, baseball fields, indoor swimming pools, etc. And these things, you know, there are a few of them that we actually do have, and a lot of them that we don't have and may not ever have: lacrosse fields, boat launches. It's just, you know, and so those are things that we looked at as we were planning for the future. So I can tell you, as far as recommendations go, you know, we make recommendations in the second part of this, which we'll be sending you, about number of parks and distribution of parks, locations of trails. And we also make recommendations about specific types of facilities that are needed now and in the future. And so things like baseball fields are mentioned, pump track is mentioned because it came up a lot in the public involvement, and some of these other things. So this is where, like, this is just another way for us to look at what do we have, what do we need. And so with that, I'm going to stop talking. I'm sorry I went over. Next steps, we have another work session with you on April 28th, and we'll have more time at that one. And we have more technical topics to discuss. And then we have an official meeting on May 12th, which I believe is a public meeting. And then we have a joint planning commission and city council working session in early June. I'm not sure if that date's 100% official yet, but that's the one I have on my calendar. And then we're hoping to go to planning commission council later in the summer and have this adopted, hopefully by the end of the summer or fall, early fall. So with that, it was a lot to digest. I don't know if anyone has any questions. We've had a few along the way, so maybe that covered some of them.
Yeah, so the LOP, and that's like when you're talking about LOP for trail system or something, or you're offsetting the amount of space that the trail takes up, or the whole property of the trail system, or like is that part of the metrics being used too? Like when you say developed space on a parks area, and some of the parks there's only a certain small amount of developed space.
It's not intended to be. Is the park developed to its full potential or not? Or, you know, maybe full potential isn't quite right, but like manicured lawns are still considered, you know, developed. So, I mean, the only parcels that we've, you know, there are a few parcels that we separated and broke out natural area from neighborhood park, but mostly what you see is either a park that's completely undeveloped, which means it has nothing on it. So Champion Way, Deer Point, and Ponder Lane are all varying stages of pastures. Or, you know,
why would a park be considered a Stampede Lane being in fact it's all industrial down there?
I'm sorry, could not.
I said, why is the park considered a champion lane and that's all industrial down there? Did that come through?
No. David,
okay, hold on.
We got a lot of static coming through here.
I think I heard you, David. You're asking why is there a park designated down on Champion Way, but there is a neighborhood down there and more potential development. And there is some land that's already been dedicated.
The way considered behind the movie theater as well then?
It is the parcel behind the movie theater.
Oh, okay, okay. I was thinking Champion Way was only right there by, in front of the movie theater.
That's just a general name. You guys will get information about the undeveloped parks in the next packet.
Okay.
So going back to the LLP thing, so if it's just grazing land, so it's just it's defining grazing land as like not necessarily open natural space, even though it's unless there's trees on it or something or.
I'll try to answer this, and then Don, I don't know, you might want to weigh in. So the way that when parks are acquired, they're generally thought about like what is the purpose or the intended purpose.
David, can you mute for a moment?
There we go.
Thank you.
So when the parks are acquired, they're generally considered to be like, what is the purpose of this park? Is it going to be a neighborhood park to serve this neighborhood? So for example, Deer in Champion Way were acquired with the intention of them being developed into a neighborhood park to serve the neighborhood that's adjacent. So they're undeveloped right now. They're just whatever condition they're in. There are no trails. There are no amenities for use. That doesn't mean people aren't walking their dog on them, but they're just not really considered to be serving the community at the level that we would consider a neighborhood park needs to be. So normally there are sort of standard facilities that a neighborhood park needs to have to be, a community: paved, accessible paths, picnic table, bench, or one or more picnic tables and benches, and potentially a picnic shelter, and definitely a playground, and usually an open field. But that would be a more manicured field. So all three of the major undeveloped neighborhood parcels are just kind of open grass in whatever condition. So Ponder Lane is probably the most pasture. Both Champion and Deer Point, I think, were probably graded out by the developer. They were going to be house parcels and then ended up being banked together as a future park instead. So it's not a negative thing. It's just, it's a way for us to plan. So now we know we need to target development of those parks. We need to plan for the money it takes to build those parks. So we have the land, now we need to plan for the building of them.
So it's kind of, it's a good way of understanding like what type of park designation we're low on, and then kind of devote that space to those designations.
I would say both of those, all of those parks were acquired with the intention of them being neighborhood parks. They just have never been developed to be. I mean, you can acquire an open space that's just open space. And it's true, some park systems, all of their undeveloped land is lumped as open space until it's developed. And so it could be natural area or it could become something else. I personally think it's a little clearer to keep it in the category it's supposed to be and just note that it's not built yet. Because then we know what we have in that category and then we can plan accordingly for what else we need.
Okay, and then one more question. When I understand the need to see where we're at with the LOP system, to see what will be needed in the future in the next 15 years, is there a danger in that and allowing the city to become too lax in trying to acquire parkland and like they might wait until the last few years and be like, oh wait, we need like to make up for this.
So I can tell, well, actually, I thought you were going to ask something different. So I was going to say finger on the pulse of the problem here. But so the long range planning it's like statewide comprehensive planning goals, planning for parks and recreation and trails and open space and natural areas. There are a couple of different parts of the comprehensive plan, but those are encompassed by this park master plan. And so the city has a requirement to update their plan for a bunch of different things that, you know, planning for transportation, planning for housing and residential, making sure that there's enough land in the city to accommodate all of the needs for long range planning. And parks and trails planning is just one of that. And so this plan is intended to help with that. And it's definitely, it is a long range plan, but they always are. And the plan is for incremental growth to drive incremental acquisition and development over the course of the plan. And I mean, ultimately, it is, you know, ultimately it's the responsibility of the city leadership, but I would think also the Park and Trail Advisory Board, it's your responsibility to bring projects forward or to, you know, work with staff, work with council to help keeping to advance these things. So, I mean, the biggest like acquisitions have, especially in mini and neighborhood parks, have been relatively easy because you have the land dedication policy for neighborhood parks associated with new subdivisions. But you can see like you're doing well in those categories because you have a mechanism to acquire the land from the developer. Community parks have been harder to acquire because you don't have a constant funding stream to help pay for that larger parcel acquisition. And so when we get to part 2 next time, we can talk a little bit about that, but there are some funding reserves that are available that could possibly be used to acquire a larger parcel to help fill the gap in community parks. And, you know, of course, there are grants that can be written to help with acquisition or development. And there are...
I saw we were high on the priority list for state funding.
Right. So, and it's helpful to have an updated plan that's planning for these things so that then you can show that in your grant application and say, see, we need this and our plan says we need this. And that helps with grant funding as well.
Now, what was the question you thought I was going to ask?
The question I thought you were going to ask was, how do we pick our level of service and how do we know it's the right answer? And are we too aspirational or selling ourselves short? And that is ultimately the question when you go through one of these park master plans, is finding balance between planning for the future, meeting the needs of your community, being aspirational or not, recognizing that maybe, you know, maybe you're right where you want to be right now, but in the future, but you still have to plan for the future. And so like, there's a lot of balance there. And then of course the funding of the system, whatever you decide on. And so that's really, it's a little bit art and a little bit science, and you do the best you can with the various. This is why we go through this long process to like sort of slice and dice the data and look at it a lot of different ways to try and narrow in on what we think is the best answer.
Yeah, for like me personally, I don't think that we could ever have enough natural open space, and so I feel like we're selling ourselves short by saying, oh, the LOP says that we're over, and you know we don't. I feel like, hey, you know what? Let's keep the momentum going and be known as a city that has a ton load of natural open space, you know?
Well, and I think the thing about that, and we talked about this a bit in the technical advisory committee as well, is usually the natural space is acquired primarily by donation. So you guys are not buying that. And there's nothing that prevents you, just because our target level of service is less than what we have currently, doesn't prevent you from, if you have land donated and you guys want to take it into your system as open space, there's nothing that prevents you from exceeding the goal. This is a goal that we're setting. You can continue to exceed the goal if you have the methods to do that. But finding money to acquire open space and acquiring it just for preservation when you have deficiencies in the more active park types is a little bit harder to balance. And so that's one of the reasons that we looked at like scaling back just a little bit, which still means that you would be planning for growth and acquiring more, but it's just a little harder to control. And 19 acres per thousand where you are now, that's a lot of natural area. That's a lot of open space. I was going to go look and see, obviously Portland has a lot of open space and natural areas, but they also have a much larger population. And so I was going to go back and see who else had significant banks of natural area, but you guys are pretty well set. So, well, it is 7:32. Is there anybody else with questions?
Tracy, I want to thank you so much for coming tonight. I know that this is beyond your scope a little bit on your contract, but we really do appreciate it. We think that it's critical that we have an opportunity as a board to weigh in on the process as it goes along. I know for some folks on the board, it might seem a little weird that we broke this into 2 sessions tonight and then the next study session a little bit later on. But I think that it's such a large topic that it's a little bit easier to get your arms around a little bit and really see it, because I think the next session is really where the rubber hits the road. You know, this one hopefully gave everybody the background and understanding of why some of the recommendations were made. But I think the devil is in the detail, and that's what we're going to be dealing with next week is okay, well, we know we need another ball field, for instance. How and where are we going to find that space for that? That means another community park. How and where are we going to find the space for that, and what areas should we be looking into to get those spaces? So I think that it's important that we have that background because ultimately we're going to have to be able to explain to everybody what our recommendations are. And this will help give us that ammunition to be able to do that. So Tracy, thank you again very much.
And Don, I wanted to correct something really quick. You said another ball field. Sandy doesn't actually have a ball field now. We have a field that is managed by the school district who they tell us when and where we can use it, how we can use it, and what we're allowed to do on that field. So Sandy doesn't actually have a ball field. And that's my purpose on the board, is to make sure Sandy gets its own ball field where Sandy controls the ball field, not someone else that, you know, thinks they can dictate over top of it.
Sure. I was speaking more in an overarching generic way. Sorry.
Pump track.
Use pump track as an example.
That would be one yeah.
Or
right.
picnic shelter, or any number of other, facilities. I did not mean to imply that we have a lot of different facilities, a lot of ball fields, or that we are certainly not ball field rich. But anyway.
All right. Well, thanks everyone.
Thanks, Tracy.
I'll be planning to send out, we got some new information this week, so I'm going to digest it to the extent I can and send you out the next half of the report as soon as possible. And then we will talk about this again in a couple weeks.
Sounds very good.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All righty. That concludes our study session on the topic of the Parks and Trails Master Plan. We'll move into our regular agenda, our regular meeting for Wednesday, April 14th. I believe we have a citizen with us. Eric, please bear with us for just one more second. We got one little housekeeping thing, and that's roll call. So it'll be super fast. And then we will reward your patience with the opportunity to share with us.
This has actually been very interesting. So thank you.
Oh, no problem. We're glad you were able to make it tonight. So with that, roll call. David, are you still with us?
I am, yeah, but I'll be losing service here pretty soon.
Okay, going through a tunnel, right?
You know what you're doing. No, it's youth group tonight, so.
No problem. Mary, are you with us still? I see you. Excellent. Right, Makeda, are you still with us? Excellent, good to see you. Let's see, Sarah is not with us this evening. She had a personal matter to attend to. Rachel, are you with us this evening?
Yes, I am with you.
Outstanding. And Will, are you with us this evening?
I'm here.
Excellent. Good to see you, Will. Looks like you're driving, so drive carefully.
I'm parked.
Okay, good. Good deal. With that, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is public comment. And again, I want to thank our citizen participant here, Eric Walland. Eric has patiently waited throughout our presentation. And at this point, I'd like to allow Eric to share with us some concerns he may have. Eric, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Don. I moved into your community, my wife and I did, about 16 years ago. And so we've been part of Sandy for about 16 years. And we live on Pine Avenue. And before then, of course, it was a tree field, a tree farm. And then the park was built. And we're so happy that we have Bornstedt Park. My concerns about Bornstedt Park are echoed by a lot of the neighborhood. And the problems that we're having right now are off-leash dogs. And the growth of the park, actually, you know, the two fields there in the park, people feel that it is actually an off-leash dog park. And so a lot of the neighbors have told people and talked with them to explain to them that no, it's not an off-leash dog park. But this continues to happen. In the last month, we've had more dog attacks and more attacks from off-leash dogs to dogs that are on leash, and also children that are getting hurt. The neighbors have come to me because I think we're the oldest resident there on the block now. So they've come to us and they know my concern. I'm very passionate about the park. I have been working with Kevin Moody and with Sandy PD to come up with solutions. And I've chatted with Sarah via email and to come up with solutions on how we can solve the issue before someone really gets hurt. And before it gets so out of hand that we're looking at a problem that's going to take months or years to fix. So my biggest concern is that we have a stretch of neighbors that literally open up their front door and let their dogs out to run the park. And they're out there unsupervised to run the park. They run all parts of the park. They intrude on people's spaces. They go after other dogs. These neighbors have been talked to by other neighbors and also by code enforcement and Sandy PD, and they've been given warnings, but they continue to do so. They continue to, the behavior hasn't stopped. So it's getting to the point now to where neighbors are starting to go after each other because they want to use the park. They want to walk their dogs on leash, but they're afraid to because of the dogs that are off leash. And so we've seen a decline in the use of the park. And now the kids are coming out because the nice weather's here. And so we're seeing a little bit more children using the playground structure. And of course, you know, they're waiting for the water pad to come on. But we still have seen a major decline in people using the park to walk their dogs, and to have family picnics. We had children that actually played baseball games in one of the fields. They would have practice, soccer, softball. Some of these kids are starting to come back now, but not like they were before. And so, you know, people have it just has become more of a neighborhood nuisance. And we have one sign, and I believe, Don, when the park was built, you and I chatted years ago about putting some more signs up. And go ahead, Don.
I've only lived in Sandy 2 years, so it wouldn't have been me.
Oh, okay. It was another gentleman, I think was named Don or close to that. No anyway, problem. we put up, right on Pine Avenue where the Jersey barrier is about where I live. So there's an entrance to the park there, and there's a sign with the dog station and, you know, telling people the rules of the park and keeping dogs on leash, so forth. From Pine Avenue all the way down to Sequoia Street and Sequoia all the way down to the splash pad, there are no signs. There's nothing telling people when they walk into the park that it's not an off-leash dog park and that their dogs must be on leash. So you and I both know common sense tells us that we don't let our dogs run free in a public park, that it's common sense. So how do we address the issue beyond, we're getting beyond the education part into more of an enforcement action now. And how do we address that? And how can we get more signs put up, more communication going in that park? And how do we get the neighborhood involved to let them know that, you know, we want everyone to enjoy the park, but we have to do it responsibly and reasonably and safe for the kids. And right now it's not. So that's what brought me here tonight.
Right. Sarah, did you want to respond?
Yeah, so I haven't had a chance to follow up yet, Eric, with Officer Moody. I wanted to see where he was with the situation. And just for clarification, is your main concern the dogs that are being let out of their houses without any person with them and they're just running all over the park? Are those the dogs that you're the most concerned about? Or is this something?
Yes, because some of those dogs are aggressive, and they've actually have come into different of the neighbors' yards, and the neighbors have gone out to ask the people, you know, to not let their dogs come in the yard. The dogs will start growling. They show aggression. And so they've also showed aggression towards children. And that is the biggest thing, that is the biggest concern with a lot of the neighbors, is the safety of the kids and the fact that they don't want the park ruined because of the off-leash dogs and them not picking up after their dogs as well. So we have that, and that problem is rampant everywhere in the parks. I mean, I don't know if you can ever solve that issue, but this is more of a safety concern now.
Okay, well, I definitely want to follow up with Officer Moody and with you and just find out where he is in the process. And then you and I had discussed the possibility, and I wanted to get the Parks Board input on some additional signage. I mean, I think, you know, the off-leash ordinance, but maybe highlighting what the fine is for that type of situation. And because there is a fine. And, you know, Officer Moody may be in the process of pursuing that, but he has some steps he needs to take. And it sounds like he's cited those individuals already. Is that correct?
He's verbally warned them, but we talked today, actually. He called me today. We keep in touch quite a bit, you know, over this. And there is one neighbor that has told just about everybody in the neighborhood she doesn't care. She's been warned twice verbally. You know, she basically, the park is her backyard. She pays taxes. Her dogs can use the park. So it goes, she's not really going to do anything. And the only thing that's really going to make an impact with her, I think, is enforcement, you know, a citation. Yeah. And Kevin and I discussed that today, and he agreed with me that he believes that would be the only way we can get her to control her animals and stop her behavior. And it might not. So, but I do believe that if we could, you know, educate the neighborhood. I know that a lot of people have spoke about wanting a dog park there, but I know by learning about the park as it was being built and how expensive it was to build that park, that, you know, it's not always in the budget to go in and add a dog park into a existing park, and then have the upkeep and the maintenance on that dog section as well. And I don't think people understand it that way. They get mad because they can't let their dogs run free. And so they don't look at it as an expense. They don't look at it as, you know, what it took to build the park.
Right. I think one of the things that we've struggled with also is citing in it. I mean, we have a formal dog park now. It's located on the other side of town. We're trying to cite an additional dog park where the animals can be contained and let them run free. One of the proposals, or one of the suggestions, is the Ponder Lane property. It would be a smaller park, a smaller dog park,
right?
But it's still, you know, very close to the neighborhood, and allow for that. Unfortunately, that won't solve the problem of people who are just letting their dogs run free throughout the neighborhood.
Right.
And that's really what the problem is more of, from what I'm hearing you describe, are people who are just, basically letting the dog go, and calling it back in at bedtime kind of thing, and just letting it run around the neighborhood. So I think that, truly enforcement is the issue there. And it sounds like the police department and code enforcement is aware of it and is working on the problem. That's something that is frankly beyond our pay grade and ability to do. We do have the ability to recommend additional signage, and I think that it would be appropriate at the key entrance points, like you said, down near the Jersey barriers on the kind of the northeast side of the park. And then near the playground, there's a set of rules. And then possibly at the corner of Sequoia and Pine might be another good set of rules to go in there. But, the dogs don't read the rules when they get let out in the morning.
Right.
So it is going to become an enforcement issue.
Right.
Can I add something?
Yes.
I think what we really need to do, because it's not just Bornstead Park that has that problem, it's neighborhoods as well.
Yeah.
I think we need to re-educate dog owners. I'm a certified professional dog trainer, and I am retired now. And that is one of the things that we made sure that we taught people in training classes, that you don't let your dog go unless it's an open leash dog park. You can't do that. There's too many variables that could go wrong, and you're the person whose dog bites somebody or whatever, they're liable. They're up for a lawsuit, and hurts a child. Oh my gosh. I'm cringing as you're talking. But I think what we really need to do too is to re-educate these dog owners, because they seem to think that they rule the roost. I have 2 dogs in my backyard. I can't take them through my neighborhood because I have a bunch of other dogs that run free.
Right. I have 4 dogs myself, and we will not take them in the park anymore. We will not walk them in the park. And I will tell you why, is because 2 of my dogs will not react good if an unleashed dog just approaches them, whether they're joyful or not. They will take it as a sign of aggression. And I don't want to put anybody else's animal in that position or my own. And it's very sad because, living there for so long and watching this flourish over the years, the park. And the reason we had our house built there was because the park was going to go in. And so we've been using the park, but we don't use it anymore. And that's the reason why. And you brought up a good point that a lot of these folks feel that their animals are trained or their animals listen. I will be the one to attest right now. I hear them out there yelling, get back here, stop, and people yelling at them, get your dog back. It goes on all day long. Mm-hmm. So yes, I believe enforcement is the #1 way to correct the issue. But one of the reasons why in talking with or chatting with Sarah online is I wanted to bring this to your attention so that you knew how extensive the problem was and what we could do or what you could do as a board to, about getting some signs posted and re-educating the neighborhood. I saw a child get knocked out of their stroller by one of these dogs, and the lady that owned the dog didn't even care. She went and got the dog by the collar and walked it back to the house. Didn't even ask if the child was okay. So this is what it's become.
Well, Eric, I thank you very much for taking the time and coming tonight. I think that is.
Don, I think Makoto would like to say something.
Oh, okay, Makoto.
Can I add some? You know, that park actually does look like it has enough space for some type of running area for dogs. I don't know how much fencing is and the infrastructure required for that and the maintenance. I'm sure it all adds up. And I understand that we're looking at across the street, there possibly being a dog park over there. I'm not a big proponent of signs because I don't like sign pollution. Before you know it, you have 5 signs on one pole and it looks trashy, in my opinion. This is definitely an instance of law of enforcement, and it'll run its natural course with the specific individuals, it sounds like. And definitely, you know, if the community as a whole in general can get video evidence, that's always, you know, good. But I don't agree with maybe a temporary signage or like a small sign where there's already signs, but I hesitate to start putting signs up and down the street every time, you know, there's something going on. So that's just my 2 input. It's a problem. I understand it's a problem. It definitely needs to be dealt with, but I feel like additional signage, doesn't it already say that dogs have to be on the leash at all the parks? Isn't there signage at all the parks?
In this case, there's 2 signs there, one at the kind of northeast and then one over by the playground, the general one.
Also a city ordinance.
Yeah, I think Mary is right, though. I think what she said about this, while we're talking about Bornstead, this is not an isolated park and it's not an isolated incident within a park. And so I think maybe we need to schedule this as a regular agenda item to have a little bit further discussion on this topic and maybe have the opportunity to talk about, you know, how we go about educating people, whether it's through the, you know, city newsletter or through temporary signs or.
What is the fine for having your dog off leash?
I don't know the exact number, Rachel. I can follow up.
I would wonder, and I'm kind of on the other side of the sign thing. I think that maybe we do need a couple more signs. And maybe we need something that also indicates the fine, whatever the fine is. I don't know. I think this does deserve further discussion. And I think that it can be extremely preventative for families and dog owners to take their dogs out and enjoy our green spaces when people are afraid that their animals are going to get attacked or their family members are going to get attacked.
Okay, why don't we do this? And Sarah can, oh, Sarah, do you got a question?
Yeah, just quick before we wrap up, and then it sounds like we're going to move this to a future meeting as well. In the short term, there's a couple things that we can do. We can post some reminders on Facebook and potentially maybe Jeff, you're with us right now, maybe in Sandy Source at some point. But you know, in the short run, we can do a little bit of that, and then we'll follow up at another meeting and talk about it further.
Great. I would suggest that we go ahead and schedule it for a formal topic for possibly the May meeting, or if that's too full, the June meeting.
Yeah, okay.
Is it harder to prosecute these cases if there isn't proper signage every so often or something, or?
You have to be able to show the people are aware of it. You got to be able to demonstrate that we've done our due diligence to get that word out in order to really deal with it. They can cite based on one sign. You know, if people want to protest it and, you know, demand a trial, that is certainly their right, I believe.
You have to
be able to show that we've done our due diligence as far as notification.
Yeah. But how about a couple temporary signs, just like the COVID signs?
Well, and I think that's what Sarah was suggesting that we could do on the short term.
Yeah. Okay.
And I also, after talking to Officer Moody, he said that he can also trespass people from the park use as well. So not only can there be a citation written, but there can also be a trespass with that as well.
Certainly.
So that would be like the end result would be the trespass.
Yeah, that's the harsh result.
Yeah. And I don't really, honestly, I don't want to see that happen.
I don't think anybody wants to see that happen, but nobody also wants to see a dog get hurt or a child get hurt,
right?
Or, you know, any of that either. So I think that it's. Oh, I think somebody was trying to say something, but anyway, we'll go ahead and schedule this, Sarah, for an upcoming meeting, and Eric, we will let you know what date that meeting is scheduled for, and hopefully you'll be able to attend with us also.
That'd be great. Thank you so much, guys, for letting me join tonight.
Yep, and thank you for your patience while we work through some other things too.
Oh, no problem. Thank you very, very much.
You bet. You're welcome to stay with us, or welcome to go have a nice evening.
I'm going to go have a nice evening.
Oh, okay.
You all do the same.
No problem. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Wallen.
Okay, that takes us to meeting minutes. I believe there was a correction or two. I have one correction that I'd like to add. On the minutes, it said motion was made, I believe, by Makoto, seconded by somebody else. And then on the next page, it said that I made the motion, and I did not.
Okay, so you actually made the motion, but then you made somebody else make the motion. And so I was like, okay, what? If you listen to the recording, I'm like, well, I'm just going to put it all in there. So I can go back and correct it. But you did actually make a motion.
Okay. Well, we only need one motion, so.
Yeah.
Anybody
and
else?
Then the other thing was Mary let me know that she was not listed as being present, and we have to fix something at the back end because she's not currently listed. I'll follow up with Jeff on that. But that was a good catch. Thanks, Mary.
Do we have a motion for amending the minutes and adopting as discussed?
I motion that we go with our minutes as they are.
As they're amended?
As they're amended, yes.
Okay, second.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Excellent. Thank you very much. Are there any changes to the agenda? Does anybody have any additions or deletions that they would request? None? Okay.
Wait. I'm sorry, Don. It took me a second to get off mute.
Okay.
I have some questions about Tickle Creek Trail. So I don't know if that needs to be on the agenda or if that's just like comments at the end or something. I don't know.
Let's move that down to the end of the meeting and ask those questions.
All right.
All righty. I'm writing down Tickle Creek questions, and that will go in right after item 9.3. Okay, next is new business. I believe we have a guest to discuss public meeting laws. Jeff Aprati, our city recorder. Jeff, I hope, number one, I hope I pronounced your name close to correct there on the back.
You did.
And number two, I hope I haven't broken any laws so far tonight.
Oh, none that I'm aware of, Chair Robertson. No.
Night's young, so we'll see.
All right. Well, thanks, Don. I appreciate it. And so I am Jeff Aprati. I'm the city recorder. I'm also the assistant to the city manager. And Don and Sarah asked me to be here this evening just to talk a little bit about public meetings law and public records. I know that Sarah included kind of a brief document overview in your resource packet. But I'm just here tonight to just briefly summarize it, but I think more importantly to answer, or at least attempt to answer any questions that you may have about public meetings and public records. And if I don't have the answer, I can certainly get it for you. So is everybody familiar with this document that was sent out? I guess it was maybe a couple of months ago in your resource packet, but it was like a 2-pager. Oh yeah, okay, great. So I'll just kind of touch on a few things. What is a public meeting? Oregon has a series of public meetings laws contained in Oregon Revised Statutes, Chapter 192. It covers things like public notice requirements, minutes requirements, And the purpose of it is to ensure that the public has the ability to observe public meetings and understand how and why their government makes decisions. And the important thing is that it applies not only to council or staff like myself or Sarah, it also applies to members of advisory bodies like yourselves. So that's why we're here tonight. And it applies to more than just formal meetings like this one. Anytime that a majority of you are communicating together, making a decision, or importantly, or deliberating toward a decision, that's technically a public meeting. And so why is that important? Well, we all know, you know, we get on group email threads and things like that. So if a majority of you are in an email thread and you're having a conversation about a public policy decision, that's technically a public meeting. And if that email chain hasn't been noticed to the public, which probably hasn't, that's not consistent with the law. So we need to be careful about, you know, about avoiding situations like that. A rule of thumb is don't reply all. If you have a question or want to say something about a public policy matter, that's a good rule of thumb. Any quick questions about that? Or there's more to touch on, but I know that's a hot topic. Or do you want to save any questions for the end?
I'll save my questions, but whatever works best for you.
Okay. Well, I'll just run through the rest of it and then we can have a conversation.
Okay.
So public access to meetings, all public meetings must be open to the public. You have to give notice within a reasonable time period. I saw that Sarah put the Zoom link for this meeting right there on the agenda. That's perfect in this interesting COVID time. Materials that you're going to be discussing need to be available for public review ahead of time. You don't have to have a public comment period, but it's a great idea and it's encouraged. I saw that you just had that, which is fantastic. Meeting minutes, which you just talked about, they actually don't have to be written, although many boards prefer that. You need written minutes or an audio recording or a video recording. That's the bare minimum, but you can certainly do more. Public record, let's get into public records. All of us create public records all the time, even if we don't realize that that's what we're doing. So the Zoom invitation emails for this meeting, that's a public record. There are a lot of public records. So it's a public record is any writing that contains information relating to the conduct of the public's business that is prepared, owned, used, or retained by a public body, regardless of the physical form or characteristics. So that's the definition. It could be, it's not just paper, it could be photographs, files, sound recordings, electronic documents. And generally, not all the time, but generally speaking, public records are subject to disclosure through the public, to the public through the records request process, which goes through my office generally. This includes public records generated by advisory board members like yourselves. So let's get into a topic that people talk about a lot, which is personal email accounts and devices. So while you can use your personal email account or device for sending and receiving messages related to city business, please realize that those accounts or devices could be subject to public records disclosure and search. So if you're doing city business, and I do this too, but if you're doing city business on your personal device or through your personal email account, which I don't do, those devices and accounts could become subject to a public records search. So a rule of thumb, if you're doing business on your device, don't expect privacy, because it hasn't happened since I've been at St. But I'm definitely aware of other cities where people's personal devices or personal computers ended up getting involved in a public records dispute and court-ordered searches. And that's an extreme situation. I don't expect that would happen, but it's possible. So be aware of that. If you're not comfortable with that, avoid using your personal stuff for city business. So those are the big things I wanted to touch on, but I guess the other thing is, please feel free to contact me. I'm sure Sarah can forward my info to you. It's on the website as well. There are also some great resources on meetings law and records law. If you want to be a nerd like me and read all the stuff, the State Department of Justice and the State Secretary of State's office have great resources. But I also just want to answer any questions that you may have at this point. So thank you very much for having me.
Does anybody have any questions for Jeff?
Thank you, Jeff. Oh, Mary has one.
Mary had one, yeah.
If you don't use your personal email for it, what do you do? I mean, and you need to email somebody, well, how do you do it?
Just make a bunk one.
So Makota's right. You could set up a separate account to conduct city business on. If this is, I shouldn't speak for IT, but if there is a need to create, so like for instance, the Planning Commission has city email accounts, and that is something that we could potentially look into. I know there is probably a cost to that, so I don't want to speak for IT, but if that is something that the board would like me to look into, I can look into it. So then you could potentially have a public email account, which would be separate.
Okay,
I mean,
thank you.
We're an advisory board, so it's not like we're actually doing any legislating or any, you know, I'm sure.
Well, having been in the public sector for a good number of years, I too have heard horror stories. I have never experienced a horror story firsthand. I've just, you know, heard the rumor and innuendo. I think it would be interesting to find out, Jeff, if it's not too much of a hassle, to find out if we could have the choice of utilizing a city email address. The nice thing about that too is that can be made public so that the community would have access to it and can directly email us if they have comments or concerns, as opposed to emailing your personal private email address. So there is an advantage to that. And I think that that's probably the neatest, cleanest, and best way of doing it. You're right, Makoto, we are an advisory board. All we're doing is making recommendations. But if we make a recommendation that the city does something, the city does it, and it does not work out for all the best intentions, then there is the possibility through discovery of going back and trying to find out, where this idea came from. And that in turn is what leads to, kind of going back through the system and finding out where an idea's roots come from and how it moved up the chain, which would include us potentially. So the likelihood of it happening, slim, but that certainly does not mean impossible.
Well, I would be more than happy to look into that, and I can report back to Sarah or Dawn or both with that information.
That'd be great. And feel free to report to Sarah. You don't have to give me a call.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeff.
Is there anything else, Jeff? Does anybody else have any questions for Jeff?
Not at the moment.
No? Okay. Jeff, thanks so much for bearing with us this evening.
Thank you.
Oh,
thank you, Jeff.
I've had my share of late night city council meetings, so this is nothing. So my pleasure.
I bet you do, but it's just one more stack, one more brick on the load, right?
Yeah. Thanks for the work you do.
My pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Next on the item is old business. I do not see any, so we'll proceed to staff updates. Sarah, tell us about the community garden and what's going on.
Do we even
okay. What's that?
Do we have quorum right now?
We do.
Well, Will had to leave and David had to leave. So we have 4 of 7.
Yep.
So you do. Yep. Yes. Okay, and I'm going to make a suggestion to them and to Sarah as well, that maybe they go back and listen to the recording, at least the public meeting law portion, and just remind them that that recording is available so they can go back and catch up on the meeting if they want to. Okay, so community garden, I've got some news. So the ant farm, thanks to NUPA, has come up with a plan to do some repairs in the garden. The funny thing, this morning they were going to go over and do the lion's share of it, but then they had the wrong size bracket, so they had to go back to Home Depot. So they're going to get it scheduled here soon. But what they're going to do, if you want the nitty gritty, is put brackets on the boards and the posts so that things are a little bit more secure for those beds that need a little shoring up. The other thing that may happen with the ant farm is NUPO really likes the idea of having a couple of their youth corps workers coming over there a couple times a month to help with the weeding. One of the garden bed owners donated some beds back because they're moving. And so the ant farm has one bed in there to also work with some of their youth corps. And then we talked about the possibility when people have extra produce or crops from their beds, that we would have a basket there for the ant farm, because they have their farmers market and they sell produce there. And I know the year that I had a bed there and grew like 5,000 tomatoes, I would have loved to have known someplace I could have donated those. So it's turning into a really nice collaboration. The ant farm built the beds in the first place when the garden was, originally built. And it's nice to have that partnership. The bid that they came in with is far lower than anything else that we'd gotten up to this point. And so I'm really pleased that we're going to get some repairs done at a minimal cost. So it's a nice partnership, and we thank them. Any questions about that?
No.
The garden is sold out for the second year in a row. So that's also really nice.
Great.
Yeah.
Very good. Next is council adoption of pesticide policy.
Yeah, so some of the, like Makoto and Dawn are aware, the previous board had, and it's in your notebooks as well, had recommended a pesticide policy. The city didn't really have anything formal or written. So this was kind of a starting point. It's pretty basic and specific to herbicide use, but it's now on the books. It's been adopted by council. It actually went through on their consent agenda. I had some concerns. I really wanted to get it passed before the spring sort of parks picked up as far as maintenance and spraying and things. I really wanted to get it in place before that happened. And the council's been so busy and getting on the agenda kind of tough. So we were able to put it on the consent agenda. The council got an opportunity to review it ahead of time and let us know if they wanted to put it on the regular agenda for more discussion, and they were happy with it. It passed unanimously. And I think they're very happy to see something in place. And as a side note, at that same meeting, Shelley from planning has made a proposal that Sandy work to become a bee city, which would mean we would take even more steps. Yeah. So there's good things going in that direction. It's going to be fun to see that all come together. But council was really just unanimously supportive of what the board had done and proposed. So congratulations.
Good news there. Thank you.
Yeah.
That goes to a lot of the previous members. They did a lot of work on that.
I did fill in Susan and Michael. Yeah, made sure they knew.
That's awesome.
Good. Yeah. I hope they were happy.
Yeah.
Next is our board schedule. As we pointed out, tonight's the 14th. We're having that meeting. We have a work session for the chapters 5 and 6 for the master plan, scheduled from 6:30 till 8 p.m. approximately on April 28th. Well, approximately 8 p.m. It may go a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, but definitely starting at 6:30. And then our next regular meeting will be scheduled on May 12th from 7 till approximately 9 p.m. With that, let's talk about Tickle Creek questions.
I will make it really quick, you guys. Just a question. After the ice storm, lots of downed trees, right? Lots of downed trees. Those trees were chopped up. Some of them went across the river. Fine. I understand that it's a natural trail area, and the trail is clear and available for families to walk on. But I also have this like question in my head about fire safety and making sure, like, I don't know, when we have big ice storms and loads of debris and we push it off the trail, which is still, I mean, it's supposed to be natural looking and everything. I get that. Is that just the way we keep doing it? We just like leave it there, or I'm just curious.
Good question. You know, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Well, Dawn, I was actually going to ask you if you had any experience with this, because I'm going to need to follow up with Parks Maintenance and find out what their regular process is. But I thought you might also have some insight.
You know, it was interesting when I worked down in Ashland Parks. Fire danger was a much higher, you know, concern, just because Southern Oregon was so much drier. Recently, we've become drier and drier, and so I think that you know, we need to take a look at how we're dealing with the debris that does fall down, and as it dries out, becomes more flammable. I know that oftentimes in park maintenance, we would try and utilize some of that debris for certain causes. We would use it to block off trails that were kind of built by kids or adults going into areas where they shouldn't be. So we would use it as barricades and be able to block it off that way. Sometimes we would try and salvage some of the wood and use it as an alternate fuel source for folks who, you know, rely on that as their heat source. Sometimes we would definitely encourage leaving a lot of the woody debris in the stream as habitat area. And we would also take a look at woody debris throughout the surrounding forest part of it as habitat area. So we would try and strike a balance. We wouldn't necessarily remove all of it, but we would take a look at where we could utilize some of it, whether it was for habitat, whether it was for barricading, whether it was for a fuel source for people, or whether it was just stuff that we needed to get out of there and chip up and utilize for, you know, trail maintenance or something like that. So it kind of runs the gamut. I'd be curious to find out what our folks do. But
I'll follow up and get some information to the board about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. Like finding out what can we do with it, what can be done, even if we have like a community cleanup day or like the alternative fuel source. I think that's an awesome idea. And I realize like keeping logs in wood, what did you call it? Wood sources in the river?
Yeah, woody debris.
Okay, woody debris. Okay, yeah. All right.
It's habitat.
Yeah.
It's habitat.
No, yeah, I understand that. I did not call it woody debris just because it's, I guess my vocabulary just isn't that sophisticated. I'd just say tree in the river. Okay.
Wouldn't the fire department know what to do?
I'm sorry, what was that, Mary?
Wouldn't the fire department also know what to do?
Yes, I would assume they would.
Because that would be, you know, a kind of a fire break actually between one neighborhood and another.
Yeah, it could be, or a fire hazard in one neighborhood to another.
I'm pretty certain that the Parks Department collaborates with the fire department. You know, we have a close relationship with them, but I'll talk to Joe and get some more information. But I'm pretty sure they collaborate with them about that type of issue, but I'll follow up and make sure.
Yeah, it was just
Can we put that on the agenda for our next meeting so that we do definitely follow up on that, please?
Yeah, I do know on a lot of the trails up on the mountain, there's placards that kind of talk about the environmental aspects of fallen trees and fallen, not just in the rivers, but also in the parks themselves. And it's part of the feedback loop to create habitats for critters and everything from critters to insects, which goes to feed the birds, and it's a whole thing. And so I understand the concern for fire, especially with this last summer, and I'm sure.
I kind of feel like our forests have not been well maintained. Like we've kind of given a lot of habitat, I guess, to the little critters, and so that's another reason why we have these just enormous
Yeah, I feel like Dawn probably, there's probably a middle ground somewhere where where it's probably a little safer, at the same time continues the health of the ecosystem.
You bet.
And I would hate for any of the trees that look not so healthy to end up toppling down on anyone on the trails.
Yeah, I think that hazardous trees is a legitimate concern that I think we all share. And I think that, you know, if Sarah wouldn't mind reaching out to Joe a little bit and getting a little bit of feedback on this, would be helpful for us.
Yeah.
So we can bring it back up.
Yeah, and I absolutely. And I wanted to add, just as a reminder, that this Saturday is the community cleanup. It's our Sandy Solve event. It's from 9 to 1. You can sign up at the solve.org website, but you can also just come to the community center. It's from 9 to 1. If you happen to have some time and want to do a little work around the community, that is happening this Saturday.
Excellent, thank you. I'll make a note of that. So Saturday, 9 till what time? 9 to 1. Okay. All righty. Anything else for the good of the order?
No.
No. All righty. Well, with that, we've completed our agenda. We will next get together on April 28th. So meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.